Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Dear viewers, this is another episode in Sirat al-Mustaqim, the straight path, my journey in life basically. And I'd like to continue along the lines of activities in the UK. I've mentioned talking in the universities, I'd mentioned running Dawah courses in the UK, and also now, is it only a question of lecturing? Is it only a question of talking in the universities and the communities? Is there something else that we can do? And in fact, in talking to the universities, one of the things that we were invited to do was to give Ramadan advices to the students when they broke fast, in particular Leicester University. But one year we did Leicester University for 1 week, the Montfort University for 1 week, and the University in Nottingham for 1 week. So, and after that it was the end of the academic year. so alhamdulillah, following on from that, I was involved with the community in Loughborough, and one of the brothers there who knew me, he phoned me up and he said, "Daud, we've got a meeting to talk about the way forward for a weekend educational trust. Would you come and join us?" I said, "Well, I'll come along anyway." So I went along, and they asked people who would be activists to fill out a form and sign up for it basically. And then they asked all the people who had signed up for it to stay behind. So we did. And then they said, right, the first thing we want to do is to elect the committee. And the next thing that came out was that someone proposed Daud Matthews as the chairman of the committee. And I was kind of taken aback by that, because they were all Bangladeshis, and I'm certainly not a Bangladeshi. So I was kind of surprised, and I tried to withdraw, but they said no, and they all agreed that I should be the chairman. So alhamdulillah, I became the chairman. And I suspected that it might be that they couldn't work together and they wanted someone to try to pull them together, alhamdulillah. And so I tried. And the first thing I said was, there are two things which are important. One, that whatever we do for Allah. There is no sense of personal glorification or satisfaction as such. It will only come through doing it for Allah. The second thing is that what we say we will do, we will do. We mean it. Okay? So I don't want people here who want to be deadwood and just want to come along for the ride. If they're here, you've got to be an activist. The minimum is that you're fundraising or you're an officer, like a treasurer or something. So the only guy who can put his feet on the table is the chairman. And that's me, okay? So they agreed to this. Okay? And what we started then was running a youth club for boys 11 to 18, youth club for boys or males 18 to 25, and started swimming classes, and they're going on outings. One of the brothers was already organising a football tournament, and then eventually we did in fact try to get a girls section started, but the woman that was running that, she had personal problems and had to close it before she left. But all these things were moving along pretty well, okay? And in conjunction with all of this, we had a weekend school and the madrasa type approach, and we had students there. And another school had started up, run by Voices, which was a fairly big organisation, and they were people that were motivated by my wife, and they actually started Voices, and that went off and did quite a lot. And they had a school running as well, and that was a Bangladeshi school. So my approach was that these two schools needed to merge. You couldn't have two schools in a small town like Loughborough and not have them together. And if you had them together, that would be the core possibly of a full-time school eventually. This was the feeling I had, and fortunately other people were of the same sort of persuasion or thinking along the same lines. And after about 4 or 5 years, the two schools did merge, alhamdulillah. And we had something like 30 students, they had something like 16 students, but when the school opened as the new school, there were over 70, and within a year or two there were over 90. They've had a problem with premises. We still haven't got our own premises, we can't afford them. And what's happened now is that we are in fact renting a disused building, and we're actually running classes during the week as well, and as at the weekends. And now it's extracurricular activities as well, remedial type classes on English and other subjects to help the students actually perform better in the schools. And I think each community has to do something like this to actually bring up the level of the students in the schools so that they actually do begin to shine and not just make up the numbers. And out of this we will get some future leaders perhaps. And in tune with that, of course, there's the Islamic aspect that needs to be brought along as well, and this is taking place. And even when we have these youth club type facilities, there is a half-an-hour stop, and some aspect of Islam is explained, more as a rap session than as a lecture. So this is the way things get across to the students, and alhamdulillah, that seems to be working. It seems to be growing. And I think that's a positive sign, and that since the future is in the youth, it's necessary that the youth are nurtured along these lines. And to a certain extent, this is where I feel that the mosques have let the students down, or the youngsters down. There's not enough notice taken of the requirements of the youth. What are the problems in the society? Who's trying to solve the Muslim problems in the society? Where are they getting their information from? And so on and so forth. So these things need to be approached and handled. And I mentioned before about chaplains and imams becoming chaplains, and imams actually handling disputes, because they are the knowledgeable people at the moment, until we get other people trained for these positions, and until they can come along and actually contribute to what the community really needs. Along these lines, I'll tell you what I think was an interesting story. I gave a lecture in Nottingham University, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And last year, I went into the pharmacy to collect some medicine for my wife. And the pharmacist came out. He wasn't the normal one. He said, "Daud Matthews?" I said, "Yes, that's me." So he came over and he said, "Salaam alaikum." I said, "Walaikum assalam." He said, "You may not remember me," he said, "but I was president of the Islamic Student Society in Nottingham University 2 years ago when you gave a lecture on unity in the community, and you spoke about how we should define the problems in the society, and that we should get together and try to find solutions, and we should find people that think like us, and it should be the educated ones, and that we should be motivated to do it, to solve the problems in our own community." And he said, "To tell you the truth," he said, "I didn't understand it then." He said, "But now there's a group of us sitting together and doing just this." He said, "We're trying to analyse what are the problems in the community. We're trying to see what resources we need to try to solve some of these problems, and we're looking to see how we can do it and how we can find people to help us to do it." So he said, "We're doing exactly what you said, even though I didn't understand it 2 years ago when you told us." So now, when you talk to the youth, you don't know what the benefits will be. You don't know where it will go, and you don't know if anyone's going to take it up. But that doesn't stop us talking. Surely we should be pointing things out. I mean, if I put the thing in a real perspective, how many mosques are doing what I would call strategic planning? For the computer centre, I had to do strategic planning, and one of the basics of that was what's called the SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And how many mosques are looking at this? We're all being threatened. Almost every Muslim in the UK today is feeling threatened. What are we doing about it? Why didn't we see it coming? Where was our forward planning? Where was our approach? Where was our strategic planning? In another sense, those mosques that don't admit women, what are they doing about it? Are they doing fundraising? Are they trying to expand the building? Are they trying to get the facilities in? If so, when will they do it? If they're not doing some form of strategic planning, how will they possibly get a solution? Are they content that just the men go to the mosque? There are more women coming to Islam in the West than men. What are we doing for them? And the answer is next to nothing. The women in this country are sadly neglected. In many cases, there are no facilities in the mosque for teaching them Islam. So where do they get their Islam from? Their husbands? In many cases the husbands don't even attend a mosque. Where would they get their Islam from? There has to be something that fulfills that gap, okay? And it's got to be the community has got to come up with a solution, in my opinion. Anyway, let me leave that as an open question at the moment, and let me conclude this part with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear viewers, continuing with the second part to this episode on Sirat al-Mustaqim, I'd like to continue where I left the open question last time of what are we going to do for women in the community who can embrace Islam. In actual fact, a group at Cambridge University wrote a report at the end of last year, published it, on findings of the women embracing Islam and their personal problems once they became Muslim. And this was done in conjunction with the New Muslim Project in the Islamic Foundation. And the findings basically are what we already knew, that nothing is being done for these women in general. Okay? But there are other things coming out from the society. And since this program is for the Middle East, perhaps I can mention it. Okay? It's not meant as an insult, it's not meant to be rude to you, it's meant to show you the reaction in this country, and that is that Muslim reverts in this country would prefer to marry African or West Indian or English Muslims rather than Arab or let's say Pakistani, Bangladeshi, that group. Okay? The reason being that they feel that the way these people treat their wives is not the way that English women would like to be treated. And this is a potential problem now, because how will these women get married? So, I mean, this is something that needs to be taken on board. I know one counsellor group that actually talks about pre-marriage counselling, which is a possibility and a potential solution for such problems. But how many people would attend such a course? If you were thinking of getting married, would you attend a pre-marriage counselling course? I think these things need to be thought about, and we need to think about what the solutions really are, and we do need to find solutions. If we look at the time of Umar, we find that he would say that the community is responsible for solving its own problems. And surely that's what we should be doing now, particularly in areas where we have Muslim minorities in non-Muslim countries. How are we going to solve the problems? The state's not going to solve the problem for us. We have to solve the problems up to a point, and where we can't go farther, we have to try to get state support. But who's doing it? We have no unity in the communities in general, and this is another big problem. We've still got people locked in the old style of combat, if you like, of my madhab is right and yours is wrong. Whereas instead of saying that both are right, we've got so much in common and we've got a choice and moving forward and building on it, they want to polarize it and move apart and do nothing. And that's why the effort's got to be with the youth and the younger people, in my opinion. And if we don't do something very soon, it will be too late, because we're being fractioned, we're being split, we're getting pressures from all sides and on all sorts of counts. And it's the media that is pushing this. It is really a media war on Islam. But of course it's backed by the politicians. So we have a real problem. And a lot of people now are feeling intimidated that it's not possible to talk about Islam, that it will give offence, and so on and so forth. And once they start to question that, and once they start to withdraw into themselves, what's the next aspect? That the outward manifestation of the practice of Islam will start to decrease. And this is a serious problem, because once that happens, surely we could be working towards the beginning of something which will be destructive from within. Of course there is Allah, and Allah can do anything, but have we got the Iman, the strength of faith, to trust Him and to do what we should be doing, irrespective of the problems that we face? We do face many problems, but then how good a Muslim are we? Are we as we should be? Or are we talking as we should be talking? But are we living up to what we're saying? I found in doing dawah that not only did I have to increase my knowledge, for instance, I went from a straightforward translation of the Quran to a tafsir of the Quran. Okay? I went from a simple book on the life of Muhammad ﷺ to the Sealed Nectar, for instance, which is a much better book, and it gives the reason for the revelation and the time of the revelation and the circumstances prevailing at that time of the revelation. And these things are what's necessary. We need to know the background, okay? So in that way I increased my own knowledge, but did I increase my practice? Was I living up to what I was saying? How can you expect someone to change their lifestyle if you're asking them to do something which you yourself are not doing? So I would like to think that my own practice also changed for the better as I did more dawah. But other people would judge that, not me. Okay? I would like to think that I'm a practicing Muslim, but what does it mean to be a practicing Muslim? We can all do more. I can do more. How much more? But will we make the effort? And in general, we won't make any effort, let alone the effort. What is required from us today as Muslims? Simply to live up to Islam. But if we just take one example, a Muslim should always tell the truth. Just imagine if we all told the truth, what the impact would be. Immediately we would be trusted. There'd be no suspicion. We wouldn't be cheating one another. There would be no deceit. Our neighbours would trust us. There used to be a time when a Muslim moved into a community and the value of the property increased because of the Muslim presence. It's certainly not true today. Why is that? Because we don't have the respect of other people. We're not living up to the values that Islam has put on us. We're actually going away from them. And if you like, we're actually being submerged into the host community. Instead of being, as we are, the role models for the whole of humanity, we in fact are becoming lower than the whole of humanity. And it's our own choice. And why are we doing it? Why is it that we don't have a say? Because we can't agree. We're still locked in the past of talking about how long is my thobe? Where are my hands when I pray? I'm not going to that mosque, it's not my madhab. Where is the unity? Why are we splitting the ummah? Why are we causing schisms? We've got to get out of this. And if we can't get out of it, what is the future for Islam and the Muslims? It's the youth. We've got to get the youth out of it if we can't get ourselves out of it. We've got to get away from the old school, we've got to bring in the new school. And we are in fact getting now people in non-Muslim countries actually educated in Islam. Not so long ago a professor came over from Canada, and I was one of the group that he was talking to, and he said that effectively non-Muslims can teach the Quran to Muslims. Okay? Now, up to a point I agreed, but I said, if it comes to a question of Sharia, how can a person who doesn't believe in the Quran actually answer the questions? Because the way we're supposed to work with the Quran is that it acts on our heart, on a believer's heart. Okay? How can that happen if you've got someone who doesn't believe in the Quran actually arguing for you. And I said, in a non-Muslim country, we have issues which are not in the Muslim countries. And we have to develop our own answer to that. If we don't have the traditional understanding of the Quran and the interpretation of the Prophet ﷺ, how are we going to approach it? By anyone's interpretation? Because that's what it will mean if we have non-Muslims teaching the Quran. Because it will be their interpretation that they're teaching the students. They're not following a tradition at all. And I said, if we take the other side of the coin, in the Muslim countries, you've got the traditional understanding of the Quran, but you don't have the same problems that you have in a non-Muslim country. So they're not faced with the same questions and not having to answer the same questions as we have in the non-Muslim country. So these are the two issues. And eventually the guy more or less agreed with me, because later on in the discussion, a Turkish person turned around and said, I follow my own interpretation in a non-Muslim country. And this is the problem. People will follow their own interpretations if we don't have a traditional approach, in my opinion. So there are big issues coming up, and we're tending to ignore them. We're not even thinking about them, and they need to be thought about and resolved, inshallah. We can't do it, but Allah will show us the way if we are serious with Him and if we are honest with Him. Okay? If our intentions are correct, Allah will support us and will show us ways which we can't even dream of solving these solutions, inshallah. Let me end this episode here, and inshallah we'll see you again soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.